Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tronage, and today we're going to be talking about drone drop for the month of July 2019. Word on the street is there's some incredible value in here, so I'm dying to check out what's inside. Want to see? Stick around. Alright guys, we got our drone drop box for the month of July. I am super pumped to open this thing up. Drone drop has been kicking it out of the park lately, giving us some huge value. And with the new kid on the block, FPV Crate, maybe they're starting to get a little, worried, and they're giving some good value, so you don't think, maybe I should go check out the other guy. So I am super excited to open this guy up. But before we get started with that, make sure you slam that subscribe button. While you're at it, hit that bell icon. Makes finding my videos a whole lot easier, helps support the channel, and keeps you in the know when I post videos like this one. So let's dig in. What I'm going to do, going to bring you all in close. We'll crack it open, give you my genuine live reactions as we open this up. We'll see what's going on inside. Then we'll do a little bit of a cost analysis and see what it's worth and if it was worth what you paid. And all that fun jazz, you know what I'm saying? And we'll talk a little bit, So, without further ado, why don't you come on in? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got our drone drop. So let's give it the little flipperoo. We'll cut open our label. And let's dig in. Alright, to start with, we got our sticker sheet. Pretty cool, liking that. I like when they give a little variety of stuff, like different sizes of different stickers and stuff. Pretty cool stuff, I'm liking it. Pretty cool. Moving on, wow, okay, let's go for some props, because those are always something that's, pretty cool. So we got our Azure Power. We've gotten similar ones to this. I don't know if we've gotten this exact spec before, but let's take a peek. They're 5.1s by 5s by 3s. So there's our props in a nice green color. Pretty cool. I'm always happy to get my fancy props. And these are kind of very almost gem tone style. I don't think it's probably coming through on the video, but it's kind of like a gem emerald green color. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, let's dig in. Oh, look at this. We got ourselves a soldering iron. And by the looks of it, a portable soldering iron, because I'm seeing this little guy right here. So let's open this up a little bit. I mean, it looks to be like a full-fledged soldering iron, but with this little attachment right here, bingity bangity boom, we now have an on-the-go soldering iron with an XT60 connector to do all your on-the-go repairs. Pretty nifty. Pretty cool, actually, to be honest with you. Kind of a little unexpected. Be quite frank. Not something I would expect out of drone drop. Kind of more of a quad box item, but I'm still happy with it nonetheless. Moving on. Ooh. We have the White Noise FPV Synergy F4 Revision G. And this is actually something I've had in my back pocket for a while. I've been trying to work on a video on it, but I really haven't had time to. But it is a I think I have revision C or D. I'll have to see what revision I currently have, but it's cool to have the latest and greatest. And if you're not aware, basically it's a flight controller that pretty much has everything you could want and provisions to put everything on it to mount directly to it. It's a pretty cool thing. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Pretty cool. We also have a Immortal antenna, looks like. Yes, Crossfire Immortal antenna V2. Interesting. I don't have a V2 Immortal yet. Maybe it'll be even more immortal and less bendable, if you get my drift. I use these a lot, and even though they're called the Immortal, they end up getting kinks and stuff in them. But so we'll see. We'll check that out. We got some solder, the TBS solder. We've gotten this before in previous boxes. And, you can always use some solder when you're doing those repairs, especially when you got your little soldering iron to use it with. And let's see here. Lastly, we have the glass ND filters. So these are going to be, I'm guessing, for your GoPro. They're glass ND filters. They're neutral densities. They are for basically, there's like sunglasses for your GoPro, and these are glass filters to put in. Unfortunately, I don't have a GoPro that these can go into, so I don't really have a use for them, but still, they're cool nonetheless. All right, so to recap, we got the glass ND filters. We got some solder. We got the soldering iron. We have the Immortal antenna. We have the Synergy F4 flight controller with provisions for all kinds of stuff. And I'm just curious. Let's just take, while we're all up in here close, let me just see if there's anything real fancy and different about it that I need to be aware of. So we got our little connector doohickeys to go to a 4-in-1 ESC. We have a little adapter plate. Looks like this is new to me. But it's like looks an adapter plate to use for if you're using like a TBS Nano to adapt it to fit into this. And let's take a little peek at the Revision G Synergy F4 flight controller. Come on. You can do it. There we go. Aha. Okay, so I see what they're doing here. So basically, this is what I was saying. It's an F4 flight controller with provisions that you can mount your receiver directly to it. As well, you can mount a TBS Unify Pro directly to this, just like the other sort of like boards that do that same thing. And then this is a new part to me that I'm not used to seeing. So this might be part of one of the newer revisions, where you can take a TBS Nano, put it in that hole, and then by the looks of it, lines up like this, I think. Yeah, I think it lines up like that. So it allows you to use the Nano in the same footprint as the Unify Pro. So that is a pretty cool little piece of kit there, I must say. But I am curious to see what I have as far as my revision for the Synergy F4. So not that it's really applicable to this box per se, but just for reference, because I was kind of curious myself. Here is the Synergy that I had that I was playing with and, you know, trying to figure out some stuff to do with. And this one is actually the Revision E. As you see right there, you may not be able to read it. It might be a little blurry, but it's Revision E. So basically, this is probably more of the final version now, the Revision G. So it'll actually be kind of interesting to do a little video comparing, you know, the evolution of these and such. Anyway, this is not what's part of the box. That is. And in case you're curious, I do plan on pairing that with a GS 40 amp 40 4-in-1 ESC. Some pretty cool stuff. But I digress. That is for another project for another day. Back to what's in this box. We have the 3 packs of the Azure props. And we have the sticker sheet. There's some pretty cool value in here, especially getting a freaking Synergy F4 flight controller. Let's run some numbers and see if Drone Drop brings it home. All right, I ran some numbers. Here you go. So let's go through these line by line and we'll, you know, just kind of hash things out. So first we got these Azure props. And let me tell you, I am a big fan of always getting some props. I throw props on every time I have a crash that anything looks bent, chipped, banged up, or whatnot. Now, I am new to Azure props. My go-tos are usually the Dial Cyclone and the HQ props, but I've been tinkering with these a little bit, but I've yet to really form an opinion whether I like them or don't like them. So I don't want to say anything because I don't really feel like I'm in a position where I can give my thoughts on them. However, I will say they are props and they do make things fly. So that's definitely a cool thing. So I'm happy to at least have some more to experiment and try out and form an opinion about. Next up, we have the soldering iron. Oh yes, the soldering iron, which was actually kind of confused me because I kind of felt like I was opening up a quad box, because this would be one of those types of items that would be in a quad box, sort of being one of those generic China non-branded things as a tool in the quad box. Not that that's a bad or a good thing, I'm just saying it seemed a little out of place for a drone drop box. Now let's talk about this for a moment. So I think what this really is, if we take off the little adapter that goes from the barrel connector to the XT60 connector, I think this is just a normal soldering iron. I actually found them online for about $8. Just a little bit of a different color. It was more of like a teal and black versus yellow and black, but the exact same concept. And I think the idea behind this is that you would get a, what I like to call wall wart, which a lot of people call them that too, but it's that big black plug-in thing that you put into the wall, and then it has a little wire and a barrel connector, and you plug it onto here, and you can run your soldering iron. To make it portable, you introduce this little converter that just makes it go from barrel connector to XT60. Boom. Now you have a portable soldering iron that you can plug a LiPo into. The downside here is that it doesn't have any kind of markings on here as like what's a safe battery to plug onto this or anything along those lines. So looking online, I do see that this is the one I found was rated as a 12-volt soldering iron, which would mean that this is compatible with at least a 3S LiPo. Now, you probably could get away with a 4S LiPo, although you probably shouldn't use it for an extended period of time, and I really would advise not going higher than that because you might cause some problems because there's no indication saying that you should go higher than that. Now, I haven't tried it out, I haven't plugged it in, I haven't used it at all. However, I will say that the build quality does seem a little bit, lacking. I mean, you can just unscrew this handle right off, and then inside you just see all the wirings and the connections and stuff, and, it seems, kind of cheaply made. But the reality is, if you're out somewhere in the field and you need to solder a wire because something broke and you crashed, it's either go home or be happy you had this to solder it and fix it with. So I think as long as it gets hot and can melt solder, it probably meets the requirements of being a portable soldering iron to use in the field. Personally speaking, I prefer the TS100 soldering iron. You've seen me use these before in my other build videos. Now, I'm not saying that you should use this as a bench soldering iron. I just prefer to use it in the videos because I'm not on my bench where my big soldering iron is. But it does accomplish the task fine. And if I'm able to build an entire quad using a TS100, then you certainly can use it in the field for repair. The difference is this is much more expensive. This is like maybe something like $60 to $80, something like that, I think. I don't remember. I bought it so long ago. Meanwhile, this was like $8. So, keep that in mind, and, you can choose what's best for you. This is what I choose to have, but hey, this will work just the same. And speaking of soldering, let's talk about solder. So there was solder that was included with the package here, and it was the Team Black Sheep solder. And it's the same ratio of ingredients that I like to use in the solder that I use at home, which is the 6337, I believe. Yeah, 6337, which is the ratio of tin to lead. That's right, this does have lead in it, so that means when you do handle it, you should wash your hands when you're done. Don't eat it and don't put it in your mouth. And a little misconception, when you are soldering and you see that little smoke come off, not that you should breathe it, don't breathe that stuff, but that's the flux in it kind of vaporizing. That's not like lead fumes that you're going to breathe in, but you shouldn't breathe it nonetheless. But don't eat it, and if you handle it, you should wash your hands afterwards. So that's the composition of this, and that's what I like to use. Personally speaking, if we want to get picky, this is the solder that I like to use. It's Kester brand, same ratio, 6337. It's a little smaller diameter. The one I like to use is a 0.8 millimeter. This is a 1.0 millimeter, so this one's a little bit thinner, a little bit finer to just work with smaller electronics. This also has, I think, 1.8% flux. This is 1.1% flux. The idea is this has a little bit less flux, so, to each their own, and I like to add a little extra flux while I'm doing it, so maybe with this you don't have to add as much little extra flux. I don't know. But all in all, bottom line is, if you're out in the field and you need to do a repair, you don't care what kind of solder you have, as long as it melts and holds a wire on. And that's exactly what this will accomplish, and I see no issue with using this for field repair. Now, would I use this to build a quad? Well, if it's all I had, it's what I would use, because I'm not going to go buy something special. But since I do a lot of soldering for other projects and everything, this is my solder of choice, which is the Kester one. And next up, we have the Mortal T V2 antenna. So let's take a quick peek at it. The first question you may ask yourself is, what's different with the V2? Well, what's different with the V2 versus the V1 is, first of all, the V1s used to have red little pieces of shrink tubing over here and over here on these two sides. I guess that's the first change I can see by just looking at it. And the second change, actually reading about it and stuff, is that this center hub is more flexible. Like, I can actually bend the center hub. So the idea is that if you have a bad crash, you're not going to crack that center hub and basically destroy your antenna, since the immortal antenna isn't so immortal. And if you're not aware what an immortal antenna is for, it's for those of us who are running Crossfire, and it goes on to your receiver. So this is not for video transmitting. This is for your receiver, for your controller. You know what I'm talking about. This plugs onto your Crossfire receiver, and this is your antenna to, you'd mount on your quad to receive the commands from your transmitter. It's essentially a dipole antenna, even though it has two things. You think, oh, maybe it's kind of like a diversity thing, but it's not. It's a dipole. One end's like the ground and one end's like the main area or whatever. But that's sort of like the brief anatomy of what this is and how it works. But what's great about these, and the reason why they're primarily called an immortal antenna, is because, like with a FreeSky or whatever, you usually have to deal with antenna tubes, or you do zip ties with heat shrink on them and whatnot. And these are pretty robust. I mean, obviously, if it takes a direct crash, they can get like bent, and it'll stay sometimes, so you have to unbend them and stuff. But the idea is to try to keep these all nice and straight. And since I use Crossfire, this will definitely come in handy, because there are a couple quads I have that the immortal antenna is a little beat up on, and I could always use a spare. And lastly, that brings us to the glass ND filter. So ND stands for neutral density, and this is an ND4 filter, which is a very, I don't want to say light filter, but it's certainly not a very dark filter. However, an ND4 filter is usually kind of like the standard for what we would use on a quad to put on our GoPro and film outdoors. So why do we need an ND filter? An ND filter is essentially sunglasses for your GoPro. It makes it so that you can have a certain set of settings and then bring that from indoors or outdoors. And when you come outdoors, just like your eyes, like, here we go. Here's the best way to explain it. Have you ever been indoors for a while, and then you go outdoors, you're like, oh, wow, it's so bright, and everything seems like it's just blasting you with light. But then after a little while, you're fine, and everything looks normal again. Then you may go back indoors from being in bright sunlight, and everything seems like really too dark almost, like you can't even see. GoPros kind of act the same way like our eyes do. So if your eyes are adjusted to being indoors and then you bring it outdoors, you need some sunglasses on it. That's what an ND filter does. And then when you bring it from outdoors back indoors, you can take the sunglasses off, otherwise known as the ND filter, and then use those settings on indoors. So this way you don't have to have two sets of settings, whether you're using your GoPro to film your puppy, dancing around, or you strapping it to your quad and doing some crazy race flight. You can just stick an ND filter on there and off you go. Now, unfortunately, here's where I'm going to have, I'm not going to say issue with it. It's just, it doesn't have a use for me because I don't have a GoPro that would use this filter. I have an older GoPro Hero that you can't do anything filter related with easily, and I have a Session. So for me personally, this doesn't really apply. I think this is for like the newer GoPros that, not the Session, but the regular Hero shaped ones where you have like the little cap thing that you can like put on and off. So I really can't do much with this. But it's still a cool thing to have because I'm sure at some point I will be upgrading and getting a GoPro. So I'll have this waiting for when that time does come. Overall now, looking at the whole package, is a pretty decent box. I'm not going to say it was killer. I'm not going to say it was amazing, awesome, crazy cool. There was definitely some good things in here, and especially seeing that flight controller. And anytime you get a flight controller, especially one that's pretty cutting edge and like really new, I don't want to say new technology, it's still just a regular flight controller, an F4 flight controller. However, the fact that they can cram as much as they are cramming onto it and having as much embedded on it as possible, I like that innovation. And I think that's really cool. However, value-wise, we're at pretty much what I would consider average. I usually say that around $11 for the one-time purchase and around $20, $25 for the subscription price is around what we can expect. And if you look here, we're at an 11 and we're at a 21 for one-time and subscription prices. So we're right around where I would expect a drone drop to land. That being said, though, I'm going to give this the same concept as a quad box where, you may not need a soldering iron and you may not need the solder if you didn't need the soldering iron. And just like myself, I don't need this ND filter. And if you don't run Crossfire, you really don't need the Immortal antenna because this would serve no purpose if you don't run Crossfire at all. So the reality here is really, to the average person, the props and the flight controller would be your mainstays. And if you subtract the prices of everything else out of the box, then it's not such a great value. So you just need to keep things in mind like that when you subscribe to a mystery box, is that you may fly FreeSky, but if you receive something that's for Crossfire, that's what you get. So after you take all that other stuff out, it kind of leaves you with a lackluster value. So some of that extra stuff there you may want, some of it you may not, but that's the price you pay with a mystery box because you don't know what you're going to get. Now, I will say that in my own mind, this was expected. Why? Because the last couple of boxes from Drone Drop were really good. And one pattern I've noticed is that it's never just always the same, always the same, always the same, always the same. It's usually you have some really good ones, and then you end up with some okay ones, then you might end up with a dud, so it kind of goes up, and it goes down, and it goes up, and it goes down, and that's sort of what you would expect. And this is where I would say, since the other ones were really good, now we're sort of just on par, maybe a little bit under, and that's why things like this soldering iron snuck in, just to kind of creep the value up a little bit to make it not look so empty. So that's kind of my take on this box. Definitely excited about the flight controller, definitely excited about trying out some new props. The rest of it was kind of like, okay, cool. I can see how it would be useful to some people and not useful to others. So I could see how some people would have mixed feelings about this box. But in any case, that's how I feel about it. So with that being said, that means that for July, we now have FPV Crate. That's already in on July. We now have the Drone Drop in for July. Now we're just waiting for the Quad Box for July. And then we can do a full comparison among all three of them to see really what's going on and what we can expect. So hope that helped you out, gave you a little bit of information and insight about what's going on with this Drone Drop box. And maybe you liked some of the stuff, maybe you didn't like any of the stuff, but it's a mystery box. The mystery boxes are just fun to play with, even if it isn't necessarily what you want, because you can always sell the stuff on eBay and get your money back, but you have fun with the present of not knowing what it is. I don't know why I got all creepy and whispered into the mic, but you get my point. All right, so as always, my name is Tronage. Fly strong.